After Son of Godzilla, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the Godzilla movie franchise was running out of steam, or at least budget. But you know this is going to be special. The opening text is sparkly. This was meant to be the last Godzilla film. Toho decided to end the Godzilla franchise with a big budget extravaganza, resulting in a film squeezing in a collection of different kaiju, including ones which hadn't appeared in Godzilla movies but had featured in other Toho kaiju titles. This was the ultimate culmination of several beasts from the Toho kaiju cinematic universe, a crossover film to make sure that Godzilla went out with a bang. Literally in the first 5 minutes, we get a roll call of monsters: Godzilla, Rodan, Anguirus, Mothra, Gorosaurus, and Minya. A voiceover tells us that this is Monster Island, a controlled environment where the world's kaiju exist without causing bother to humanity. Monsterland is surrounded by systems to keep the creatures contained, and a huge undersea farm which caters to the dietary needs of the kaiju there. In addition to the monsters in the initial Rogues Gallery lineup, we also have Manda, Kumonga, a favourite of mine from Son of Godzilla, Baragon, and Varan. Although it has to be said that some monsters basically do f*** all in this film other than appear very briefly. But there are reasons for that. This film is set way ahead in the future, the late 20th century, the 1990s. Can you imagine that? Initially, writers wanted to include people living on the moon. I'm glad they didn't, or else I'd feel that the human race had let ourselves down by not achieving what we thought we would have. I remember in the late 80s at school predicting what year 2000 would be like, and most of my class assumed we'd have flying cars. Over a quarter of a century has passed since year 2000, and we still don't have flying cars, just busier roads. To be fair though, when this film came out in 1968, we hadn't even landed on the moon, but the space race was in full sprint, and a rocket base is the very first thing we see in the film. That base is home to Moonlight SY-3, captained by Katsuo Yamabe. It's a rocket which also seems to be used as a fancy taxi for Yamabe and his crew to investigate various things and fly around saving the world. It has to be said that yellow seems to be the most popular colour in the future. It looks like a Minions convention at times. I especially love the futuristic washing up gloves. Hello there! I noticed when I was editing this video that I'm covered in loads of little bits. That's from where I put some Christmas decorations in the loft. Anyway, I hope you didn't find it a distraction, and I certainly hope you don't think that I'm a dirty scrubber, because I'm not. Look, nice and clean! There's no war in the late 20th century. There are no monster attacks either, as the world's kaiju are placated and restricted to the boundaries of Monster Island, until an alien race called the Kelex release the monsters and control their brains. This leads to a series of attack vignettes, where Rodan attacks Moscow, Gorosaurus attacks Paris, and as for Godzilla, he's smashing up New York. There's no explanation how the kaiju travelled such vast distances at speed. Probably best just ignore that. The plot is fairly basic. Eventually, we get back control of the monsters, thanks to the crew of the Moonlight SY-3. The Kelex then send King Ghidorah, and if this looks familiar, it's reused footage from Ghidorah the three-headed monster. Then there's an additional monster battle. Another dragon-type Pokemon, kaiju, is sent by those meddlesome Kelex, the Fire Dragon. It might be too powerful for the Earth's monsters, but we've got something that the Kelex never accounted for. The crew of the Moonlight SY-3. The story doesn't seem original. We had aliens in Invasion of Astro-Monster, and their UFOs looked way cooler. And that had King Ghidorah too, and Monster Mind Control, although that film did have a kaiju-sized plot hole. It also had this. Because it's been a few years since I saw this film, I'd mixed up elements of this film and Astro-Monster in my head. Astro-Monster is more bizarre than this film, but I think it's probably stronger because it's more interesting. This film is heralded as a fan favourite, a battle royale involving Toho's monsters. It's an exciting prospect, and the battle with King Ghidorah is definitely a highlight of the film, as are the scenes of destruction. Seeing the Arc de Triomphe toppled, Manda wrapped around some monorail thing, and Godzilla causing havoc in America are great scenes. There's a lot to love in this film, but the non-monster scenes are a bit boring, and I'm not one of those I watch it for the monster action viewers. Shin Gojira is one of my favourite films of the franchise because of the tension created by behind the scenes planning and panic. But the Kelex just aren't that interesting, and that story takes up too much screen time. I was never really convinced by their motivation.
Please, we urge you to subscribe to this YouTube channel.
The concept of Monster Island seemed really cool when I was a kid, a menagerie of kaiju, but now I realise that it actually deflates the drama. It robs the monsters of their key selling point, their destructive nature. But let's have a look at those kaiju. In Son of Godzilla, the Godzilla suit was awful, the worst of the Godzilla films so far, easily. It was a massive step backwards, and it's had a complete redesign here. The head is more expressive, and the proportions just look right. Everything has changed in the right direction. The body is really well proportioned, and the texture of Godzilla's skin looks more like what we had at the beginning, almost like tree bark rather than blobs of foam. The claws and the dorsal spikes have a lighter colour to them, so they stand out more, and the secondary rows at each side of the main dorsal spines are more pronounced. An old suit from previous films Astro-Monster and Ebera make an appearance for some water scenes. You can't mistake the profile and brow of the dorsal spikes, which are noticeably different. Well, if you're an obsessive geek like me anyway. Using old suits is commonplace in Godzilla films. Water scenes are really damaging, so older suits tend to get reused for those. In this scene here, you can see the camera pan over to Godzilla, and when the scene cuts, you can see the design swap between an old configuration to the new one. I think this is a really good Godzilla design. It reminds me of the Mothra vs Godzilla suit in terms of body shape. It just works really well. It's got character, it moves well, it's not baggy or shapeless. It's not as intimidating as some other suits, but Godzilla is a hero figure here. He's practically seen leading the battle against King Ghidorah when the kaiju assemble. Although this was meant to be the last Godzilla movie, we all know it wasn't. And this suit went on to be the main one used in several other Godzilla movies, albeit with some modifications, mainly to the head. By the time it appeared in Godzilla vs Gigan, it was literally falling to bits. I'll be covering that film shortly, and I'll show that. Godzilla isn't the only kaiju to get a shiny new body. The last time we saw Anguirus in Godzilla Raids Again, he was in black and white, and dead. But he's back here with a completely new suit, although the bent legs at the back make it obvious it's a guy kneeling down, and his mouth looks a bit too curved when it's open, but that's part of the iconic design. King Ghidorah is the same suit from Astro-Monster, but with a fresh coat of gold paint, so he looks pretty stunning. King Ghidorah. Controlling King Ghidorah with strings whilst it interacts with other kaiju, some of which also have strings, must have been a complex task. Gorosaurus is another favourite of mine. Everyone loves a dinosaur. And the suit looks pretty snazzy in this film. Bizarrely, he tunnels underground to attack France, which isn't a Gorosaurus move. But that moment was originally meant to feature Baragon, and Baragon is still referenced in the script as attacking Paris. However, AJ Tsuburaya had borrowed the suit to redress it for his Ultraman series, and because it had been well worn from appearances in Frankenstein vs Baragon and as different monsters in Ultraman, it was decided not to risk damaging it by having it involved in such a physical scene, so Gorosaurus was used instead. Manda looks great. Toho were concerned that it looked too much like one of King Ghidorah's heads, so Manda was given a new head for the movie. It was smoother and didn't have the horns and spherical things, and the body was smoothed as well. I love Manda. It's very different to many of the other kaiju. It's great to have a less humanoid shape to mix things up. It was a large puppet, but for some scenes, a smaller, less detailed puppet was used. In fact, smaller models were used for quite a few kaiju in some scenes, which is pretty typical. For Varan, the only shots we see of him are small models, because the original suit was in such bad shape it couldn't be used. That's why he's barely in the film. He's only in it for a few seconds. Blink and you'll miss him. Kumonga is one of my favourite kaiju, and reason enough to watch Son of Godzilla. There's some stock footage from Son of Godzilla here, but we also get what is clearly new footage featuring this huge puppet. And speaking of Son of Godzilla, Minya is the same suit, with just a few tweaks. Given that this is the end of the 20th century though, you think Minya would have aged a bit. Tsuburaya wasn't the visual effects director here, but he was an advisor, so had some input. The miniature work here is impressive. There seems to be less low-level detail, but it's still amazing. I do like the Moonlight SY3. It's a funky shuttle on top of a rocket. It's retro-futuristic. I can't remember my thoughts on it when I was a kid, but I imagine it's the cool sort of vehicle which would appeal to youngsters and 45-year-old men. The metallic finish gives me Super X vibes, but Godzilla fans of the time would need to wait 16 years to see that. We get some cityscapes with cars and trains. They're clearly miniatures, but that's part of the charm of these films. They still look fantastic, and the efforts made to hide the methods of movement is incredible. One of the reasons I love these Godzilla films so much is the awesome miniature work. As a kid I loved it too. I knew they were miniatures, and some of the derision these types of films attract is because of the obvious models. But for me, these are things to be celebrated, not mocked. They can look fantastic too. In the two black and white Godzilla movies, sometimes you can't even tell the difference between the miniature work and live action. If you watch my Godzilla Raids Again retrospective, I point out one of the best VFX sequences I've ever seen. As we move to colour, better cameras, better film, lower budgets, there was invariably going to be a change in VFX believability. But I still think it looks amazing. The destruction scenes are highlights in Destroy All Monsters. Godzilla and Manda causing chaos looks amazing. That scene of Gorosaurus in Paris and all the other moments look fantastic. Even the rural landscapes look great. I had to look twice to see if this was a miniature set or actual footage of the Japanese countryside. Minya and Godzilla appearing eventually gave it away. The monster battles we see in Destroy All Monsters are some of the better ones we've had. The fight with King Ghidorah seemed amazing when I first saw it, and it still feels like a decent big battle. It's mainly Godzilla and Anguirus who get stuck in. Anguirus even hangs onto King Ghidorah and gets lifted up into the air. Gorosaurus seems utterly useless until he unleashes this sweet move. Although the fight is good, it's not breathtakingly epic. However, some moments are the most brutal since Godzilla Raids Again. But they're in full colour now, so you get to see the blood. And there is blood. King Ghidorah is covered in blooded bite marks, and it's quite shocking to see Godzilla stamp on King Ghidorah's neck and blood fly from his mouth. Destroy All Monsters definitely benefits from a solid production team. Ishiro Honda was back as director, and you're passively aware that you're watching a film which is directed with an eye for quality. From seeing creative shots of Godzilla interacting with people or landscapes, or artistically framed conversations, it demonstrates the magic that Ishiro Honda brought to the series, and the fondness he had for the material. This isn't a camp monster wrestling match with rocks being thrown. Honda always takes his Godzilla films seriously. When the opening titles begin, we know we're getting the full Godzilla experience. That opening score by Akira Ifukube is beautiful. It might just be nostalgia, but Ifukube's scores really do fill me with joy. Joygasm! I don't know how much impact Tsuburaya had in his advisory role. Hopefully, some of his VFX genius was absorbed into this project. The VFX are not as good as some we've seen in the past, but like I said previously, it still achieves a high level of craftsmanship. Does Destroy All Monsters work as a grand finale? Had the Godzilla franchise ended here, it would have ended on a bit of a high. A monster mash of some of Toho's finest, brought together by the original director, producer, composer, VFX team. Well, kind of anyway, as Tsuburaya was at arm's length. We also get some familiar faces. As usual, we get some actors from previous Godzilla films. Though sadly, not Akira Takarada and Akihiko Hirata, but I guess not everyone can come back. I said it would have ended on a bit of a high, and it really is just a bit of a high. The film doesn't have the usual underlying message. Maybe there is a message in there about working together to maintain peace, but if it is there, it's pretty lost. And although the kaiju are great, and they really are great, having them confined to an island as curiosities neuters the kaiju somewhat. If we can contain them, if we can control them, they are no longer a fearsome force. And as I said earlier, the plot feels flat. It's one of the least interesting human stories of the franchise, and a lot of that is because it seems like it's been done before. We had King Ghidorah and aliens in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, but the battle was poor in that film. King Ghidorah flew off and you wondered if he was going to circle back round. But no, the film just ended. The second time in Astro-Monster, we got a strange plot but some incredible visual effects. And here we have what feels like a rehashed story, with the life drained out of it, peppered with some good moments. Also, the title. This international title, Destroy All Monsters, makes very little sense. Given the fact that the monsters now are little more than pets on display, Placate All Monsters is more accurate. Or, if we focus on the actual action, there are 2 monster baddies to be destroyed. But one of those turns out to be a UFO. But I suppose Destroy a Monster just doesn't sound as exciting. Destroy All Monsters does deliver, but I think its high fan ranking is perhaps a bit swayed by the appeal of having all those monsters in a single battle, and being followed by the weakest film in the franchise. In comparison, this is cinematic gold. I suspect quite a few people watch this film and fast forward to the kaiju sequences, because those really are worth watching. Destroy All Monsters is a pretty decent Godzilla film, but it's not one of my personal top 10, and needless to say, I'm very glad that it wasn't the last Godzilla film. And goodbye. Oh shit.